If the microphone is necessary,
yeah, I think you can probably all hear me. Thank you all very much for coming down this evening. It's a beautiful venue here at Straits Clan, so I'd like to thank all the help that Straits Clan have extended to us in putting on this evening. My name is Darren McDermott. I'm Senior Manager of the ESSEC Mannheim Executive MBA at ESSEC Business School in Singapore. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all here. This evening, I'd like to introduce the Program Director of the ESSEC Mannheim Executive MBA, Professor Cedomir, to the geopolitical, just to give you a flavour of the kind of content, the level of content and discourse that we do or we engage in on the programme. So I hope you'll enjoy the masterclass. This will be followed by a brief information session and also an opportunity to listen to and also ask questions of our previous participants on the programme, our alumni. So thank you very much, Professor Nestorovic.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry for the lights. So, for tonight, we are presenting you a short I would say a teaser or a part of one course within this executive MBA, which is ESSEC Mannheim. Maybe you don't know these two terms. ESSEC is a business school, which is coming from France, and we are present here in Singapore for more than 8 years now. We used to be in the National Library before, and now we have our own campus in One North. So you are all invited to come and see us at One North. And the executive MBA that we have with Mannheim University. The Mannheim University is a German university, and the Mannheim Business School is considered to be the best business school in Germany, while ESSEC Business School in France is usually rated as number 2 within the country. So we have some very good institutions which are teamed up in order to present this quite interesting programs. Here we have 2 persons who were in the second batch. Mirko is present here, and Mark from the third batch, who is just behind. So during the networking session later on, you can ask them what happened during this 15 months. So don't tell them about the relative importance and the relative strength or power between 2, I would say, categories. One category is represented by states, and the second category is represented by corporations. So how do they evolve, and how do they influence each other? Do they love each other, or do they hate each other? Is there a war between them? And if there is a war, what kind of war it is? So we label this, is there a widening Cold War between corporations and nation states? So it will take some minutes. After that, we'll open the discussion. And later on, there would be also a small presentation about the program itself. So concerning the topic for today, we will first try to define these three terms. What is a corporation? What is a nation state? And what is Cold War? So concerning corporations, I will take this definition coming from Encyclopedia Britannica, and according to it, what is of interest is to mention that it is a legal form of organization, so it means that it is registered, especially by the state, so this is why it is called chartered by the state, for the purpose of conducting business. So sometimes the term corporation is only referring to companies which may be listed in the stock exchange, but during this presentation here, we will cover everything. Would it be listed? Would it be LLC? Would it be family business? We don't mind. A corporation is a business. The second one is concerning the nation state. So there is also another definition. In that case, I'm taking the definition from UNESCO, where the nation state is in fact the area where the cultural boundaries are matching with the political boundaries. So it means that within one state you have one single group, single ethnic group. So in that case we have a homogeneous situation, one state with one single ethnic group inside. Of course today we don't have this kind of state. So all the states are either considered to be multi-ethnic, or we have a diversity of population within the state. So from the discussion that we will have here, we will not take exactly this definition, but we will take any state, and we don't mind if it is homogeneous or if it is heterogeneous, provided that they are referring to the Westphalian system and the Charter of the United Nations. The Westphalian system is going back to the 17th century, where in 1648, the Treaty of Westphalia has established the sovereignty of the states. And the sovereignty of the state is internal and external. So the internal sovereignty of the state means that you have full control of your territory, and the external sovereignty of the state means that the other countries are recognizing you as an independent country. So among the, let's say, 196 countries that we have within the United Nations, some of them don't enjoy full internal sovereignty, and outside of the United Nations, you also have states which are not recognized by the United Nations, but we have just a few of them. So for the purpose of this, we will refer to the Treaty of Westphalia, where you have the question of sovereignty, and the second thing is no external agents in domestic structures. It means that no one is interfering in local affairs of the state. So this is the Westphalian system. In the 17th century, it was the first time that they have established this, so it's very important for the independence and the sovereignty. Concerning the United Nations Charter, I will refer to the Article 2, and especially this part here. Doesn't work. Okay. So all members shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity of political independence of any state. So it is also referring to the Westphalian system, where the members of the United Nations are pledging not to interfere in the local affairs of the other countries. So this is for the statement. Finally, concerning the Cold War. So the term Cold War is referring to one very specific situation that is from 1947 to 1991. So some people can argue, is it 1989 or is it 1991? So I'm using here 1991 for the dismemberment of the Soviet Union. But we can also use 1989 concerning the fall of the Berlin Wall. Now, how did we come to the Cold War? A few names. The first one is Nicholas Pikeman, concerning the Rimland theory in 1942, when he was the first one to express the idea not to engage in war with another power at that time, which was Soviet Union. And after that, we have the long telegram coming from Kennan, who was the ambassador of the United States in Moscow. So he sent a very long telegram in 1946, indicating the same thing: don't engage in war with Soviet Union. the Churchill's speech in 1946 was on the same line when he, for the first time, used the term Iron Curtain, and Marshall's Doctrine, that appeared in 1947, was the main, let's say, starting point of the Cold War. So, what is the point concerning the Cold War? The Cold War, the idea is we don't want to engage in a hot war because we are not sure that we are going to win. Otherwise, we won't hesitate to engage in a hot war. So, the consequences of a hot war are so great, and especially at that time, 1947, so it means that at that time, we already have the nuclear bombs. So with the nuclear bombs, you are entering a dissuasion era, and we don't know what may happen. Will you destroy both countries? Will you destroy the whole planet? So this was the question that we used to have at that time, and the consensus was to say, we don't want to enter in a direct confrontation with the other superpower, but we may use some spheres of influence, and we can use some buffer states just in between in order to, let's say, not to permit to have an open war between them. So this is for the Cold War. Now, the Cold War, this is how it was expressed in Europe at that time, with the countries given in blue on one side and the countries given in red on the other side, and the Iron Curtain was running practically from the north to the south. Now, the situation is that we don't have Cold War anymore after 1991. After 1991, we practically don't have an ideological opposition between what we used to have, capitalism on one side and communism on the other side. So it means that we don't have an ideological war, which could be a global war between two or more superpowers. And even China, during the Davos summit in 2017, when President Xi Jinping attended the summit, he was the main proponent of the free trade and globalization. So it means that today we don't have an opposition. We have some small states, such as the states which are given here, but these states do not constitute an ideological front which could provide two parties, that is, one superpower on one side and another superpower on the other side. So if we don't have a Cold War from the ideological point of view, we have to see if we have a Cold War that is corporations against the states. And in order to see if there is animosity between corporations and states, I am using some examples. So I will start with the first one, which is a corporation against their own states, that is, and we look at three examples here: Apple on one side, Starbucks on the other side, and some banks from Catalonia on the other side. So concerning the first one, it was in 2016. Maybe you remember, at that time, the FBI wanted to unlock one iPhone which has been used for the terrorist attack in San Bernardino in 2015. And what happened is that Apple resisted to this, and it did not want to provide help to the FBI for that. So there was a huge discussion at that time. Can one corporation refuse to cooperate with one agency of the state? And if it is the case, on which ground could a corporation refuse to do so? So at that time there was a huge discussion about that. When Apple refused to this, they practically went to the Supreme Court of the United States, and just before the hearing of the Supreme Court, the FBI succeeded to unlock without the help of Apple. So they asked some hackers to help them, and this is how they unlocked the iPhone, but there was a huge discussion about that. The second one is Starbucks. So we have Donald Trump becoming the president of the United States, and maybe you remember one of his first moves was the immigration ban, meaning he wanted to close the doors to a certain number of immigrants going to the United States. And one company, Starbucks, reacted this way. So they were saying to President Trump immigration ban, they will hire 10,000 refugees. So now the question is, we have the executive power. The executive power is represented by the president. And the president will go to the Congress in order to issue a law or to issue any other legal fundament concerning the migration ban. And one corporation is saying, I don't want to respect either the executive power or the legislative power of my country. How come? So this was the discussion that we used to have in 2017. The third example is an example which is, it is coming from France, and it is looking at the situation of one French company which is called Lafarge. Lafarge is one of the biggest cement producers in the world, now melting with wholesalers, making the biggest corporation concerning cement in the world. And Lafarge used to have one plant in Syria. And when ISIS took control of this part of Syria, they also took control of the plant. And the question was to know, should they pull out of the country or should they cooperate with ISIS? And cooperation with ISIS means that you are paying taxes to ISIS, and you are also buying fuel from ISIS, and you are selling cement to ISIS. So this was the operation. And they said, yes, we will do it. So all the other French companies have pulled out from Syria, and this one continued to operate there. So one human rights organization, which is called Sherpa, which is given here, has sued Lafarge. They recently, it was a few weeks back, there was a hearing in the French courts about it. And probably Lafarge will have to pay a lot of money concerning that. But one of the answers from Lafarge is this one. It means that they're saying, okay, we have some arrangements with ISIS in order to make the plant operate. But France was informed about that. And not only France was informed about that, but France has asked the United States to save this plant. At that time, the United States were bombing Syria. And France made a demand to the United States, please don't bomb this plant that was cooperating with ISIS. And the United States did not destroy this plant. And on the other side, during all these years, if we are referring to this article, they are saying that there were links with the French diplomats all the time during the presence of ISIS on the spot. So here we have a very complex relationship. You have the terrorist organization on one side, you have a private corporation here, and you have another government on the other side, which is France. The only one which is missing here is the Syrian government, and we are in Syria. But we have the other three players who had made some arrangements on it. And we don't know exactly what happened, but now we have mails and we have information coming up. The next example that I wanted to show is the very high fine that the French bank, BNP Paribas, has accepted to pay to the United States. Look at the amount. It is close to $10 billion. And what was the problem? The problem was that this bank, this French bank, was operating with countries which were under sanctions. And these countries were Sudan on one side, it was Iran on the other side, and finally Cuba. So the French bank has not been forbidden to operate with these three countries by France. But the United States was banning all American companies to do business with them. And since the bank had operations in the United States, there was retaliation concerning them. And this is how they ended up by paying $10 billion. So it means that for BNP Paribas, which is the largest bank in France, it cannot be protected by the French government if the United States are doing something against them. So for the French bank, the question is, whom am I going to listen to? Should I listen to France or should I listen to the United States? If I listen to France, I continue as usual, but I have to pay $10 billion to the United States, or should I listen to the United States? The last example that I will show here is the latest one coming after Brexit, when Airbus has announced that they would like to leave the United Kingdom in case of Brexit. As you know, Brexit will happen very soon. And for the present day, Airbus is employing more than 10,000 people in the UK. So if they are pulling out from the UK, it means all these jobs are vanishing, and they will go either to Germany, to France, or to another country. So the question is to know, what should you do as a corporation? Meaning, there was a legitimate decision, or a democratic decision in the UK in order to leave the rest of Europe. And should you respect this, or because of this, should you move somewhere else? So there were many discussions about banks which also want to leave London or to establish their presence in Frankfurt somewhere else. Last example from Catalonia. As you know, there was a referendum in Catalonia. So the result of the referendum is given here concerning the Catalan bank bonds. So you see that during the referendum, they were drastically going down. And at that time, there was a problem, because within the confrontation between Madrid on one side and Barcelona on the other side, the corporations have to choose, especially the corporations which have established base in Catalonia. Will they continue to work from Catalonia, or should they relocate somewhere else in Spain? Because for many other corporations, if they want to deal with Spain, it didn't mean that they want to deal with an independent Catalonia. So even the Catalan banks have decided to go outside of Catalonia. But the problem was that in a time of retaliation, you have more than 1,400 entities which wanted to go outside of Catalonia, among them the biggest banks. So this is one of the biggest banks, which is called Sabadell, and you have people who were going to the ATMs and they were withdrawing money. How much money? Exactly 155. So why exactly 155? It is because of the constitution in Spain, which is not permitting parts of Spain to become independent. So by withdrawing 155 and showing to everyone, they are saying, your bank, that is Sabadell, is going out of Catalonia, so we get all the money out of the bank. So after that, things have settled a little bit. It's not over yet, but there was a problem for the bank. Should you continue to be there, or should you go somewhere else? Now, what to do? So these are the cases where either the state cannot defend you, either the corporation is going against the state, or you don't know if you have to follow another state, or if you have to follow your state. Is it region? Is it on the state level? So there are plenty of uncertainties. So concerning these uncertainties, we have to look at the relative strength of corporations versus the states. It is very hard to compare them. So I will use a proxy, which is the International Monetary Fund GDP for various countries. And on the other side, I will use the turnover made by companies. So it's not possible to compare the GDP to the turnover, but for the sake of the exercise, we will compare them. So what is the result? On this table, you have the GDP, total GDP per country, and you also have the turnover per companies. And as you can notice here, for instance, the first company here is Walmart. The turnover is $485 billion. So when we compare it to the GDP of some countries, it is higher than the GDP in United Arab Emirates, in Nigeria, in Iran, in Hong Kong, etc., etc. So everything which is given here in red is corporations. And if it is in black, it is states. So what is the point in this? If we look only at the left side of it, that is the first 50. In that case, we have very few companies which can compete with the first 50 countries in the world. But if we look at the second half, that is the second 50, this is where you have the largest number of corporations, and there is more corporations than states in the second one. So usually you will not fight against the countries which are on this list. But for the countries which are on the other list, no problem. You can fight with them quite easily because their GDP means that the company or the corporation, which is, for instance, here, I would say the usual way how companies will address politics. And in order to do so, they are using one concept, which is PESTEL, in analyzing the environment for any company. And within this PESTEL, the first one is the political one. So all this here is something that the company or the corporation will have to negotiate with the state. For the rest, also the state is intervening, but the pure political part is present here. So the corporation must analyze what is the PESTEL, or what is the analysis, or what is the environment, and after that to provide something. So, I like this. So can we go back, please, then?
Working on
Maybe I pressed too fast.
I think Apple heard something.
Maybe. Hey, is it an Apple computer? I must do this. Okay. So go back to this PESTEL, and we'll try to catch on if it works. Good. That's right. So how the companies look at the political risk, and what will they do about that? First of all, the political risk is given here. It is expropriation. Expropriation means a nationalization without compensation. For instance, you are going to Venezuela, and Venezuela is telling you this oil field is now belonging to Venezuela. You have invested $2 billion in this, thank you very much. And we take everything. This is expropriation. You don't give any compensation for this. So the danger of expropriations was practically disappeared in the 80s, just after the Iranian Revolution, because this was the latest one, which was a big expropriation. And we believe that it will not happen anymore. But that's not true. And there are many places in the world where the danger of expropriation is coming back, so the corporations have to think about this. They have a deal with the government, they invest $2 billion, they change the government, and now they say, everything that you invested there is for us. So that's expropriation. Discrimination is when, for instance, they are modifying the labor laws and they are forcing you to employ local people. So you used to send expatriates, you used to send people working there, they're telling you now, not anymore. So you have a lot of this policy, especially in the Middle East. So this kind of discrimination is also posing a problem: war, terrorism, restriction, convertibility of currencies, and everything else. How can you protect against this? We look at what happened in the past and what is happening today. In the past, the corporation wanted to act like a state, especially on two grounds: currency on one side and security on the other side. So concerning the currency, we have private currencies today, especially in the United Kingdom. So in this country, you can find a banknote like this one. So this is a banknote which is issued by a private bank. Okay? because the name of the bank is given here. So it is not issued by the Bank of England, it is issued by a bank in Scotland. On the second one here, we are in Northern Ireland, and we have the same thing. The banknote is not issued by the Bank of England, it is issued by one of the local banks there. And if you are going to a nearby country, if you are going to Hong Kong, you will also find a lot of banknotes which are issued by private banks. This one is HSBC, but we can have some other banks which are issuing banknotes in Hong Kong. So it means that private corporations, in that case private banks, are printing the banknotes. But today it is under the supervision of the central bank or of the Central Monetary Authority. They don't have full freedom for that. But in the past, they used to have full freedom for that. Can we have new private banknotes today? Yes. And I will show you an example of a fiction. It doesn't exist. Don't take them. The first one here. So, this is why we didn't put a specific name that is a specific state. We are just putting a worldwide bank, okay? And we don't put the currency unit, we are just saying 100 units. So in that case, we can recognize who is the guy who is present there. We can have another one here. So in that case, it is 50. It's a little bit lower than the first one. And this one here is 5. So maybe you don't know exactly this person, but this person is the founder of McDonald's, right? So we can invent new currencies, and the main reason why do we invent new currencies is that because in some countries the local currencies are worthless. It means that either the inflation is very high, either the exchange rate is completely fluctuating. So in that case, we cannot say private armies in the past, especially for two very big companies, the British East India Company and the Dutch East India Company. They used to have their own armies. They waged wars in various parts of the world. So the situation is that today we can also have this, but we don't call them private armies, we call them military contractors. So the military contractors are operating private armies, because when we look at the number of people that they have, it is more than 100,000 people, and armies are employing them. So the United States will look for them in order to supplement them, or in order to replace them in Iraq, in Afghanistan, or other places where they don't want to go to. So when Obama is saying, we are pulling out of this country, that's true, but they're bringing the private army there. So the private army is replacing the real army, which used to be there. So the biggest company today is called Constellis, acquiring Academy, which was the former Blackwater, and Triple Canopy. So this is the biggest private army that we have today, and even the real armies would like to be there. And this is the case coming from Russia. So Russia is willing to have some kind of private armies, that is armies for hiring, in order to bring them to some other places. So instead of having private armies, the army is going there on the private market. So that would be the opposite. While the usual thing is this one, when you have a private army, the Blackwater founder wants to boost the Afghan air war with his private air force. So can we imagine this? Private air force. So if you have a private air force, in that case you can wage real war, and you can be present everywhere. So this used to be the case in the past, meaning the companies did not hesitate to have their own banknotes. They didn't hesitate to have their own armies. Today it is usually in cooperation, because when we look at who is already? Sorry. So I have to go back to the Darren, please. Yeah, you go down. Sorry for that. Yeah, you go back to the other ones. To number 41. If it works, I hope so. Yeah, okay. So go back. Go back again. Yeah, that's okay. So we used to have this in the past, so why not in the future? However, these companies, the private corporations don't think in these terms today. What they think in terms today is to have a mitigation. That is, how to be protected against the political risk. So how to be protected? The first one is to eliminate the political risk, especially with the globalization. When globalization started more than 20 years ago, this was the golden age concerning corporations, because the aim of the globalization was to eliminate borders and to permit the free flow of people, capital, goods, and everything. And at that time, the main operator was the World Trade Organization, WTO. So even China and other countries were part of the WTO. So the companies, corporations were saying, we don't need the protection of our state. We will have the protection of the WTO. And in that case, we'll go there in order to settle all the problems. Okay, so this was the golden age of globalization, and we have many examples of this. The second one is the political risk insurance. So you are a corporation and you are going somewhere, but there might be a political risk. So you are buying an insurance against this. So we have public institutions and we have private institutions for this. So practically in all countries in the world, you have private institutions which are covering the political risk. And I will just use the example here of Singapore, especially coming from Enterprise Singapore, for companies where you have support from the state, so they're protecting you against expropriation, against currency inconvertibility, political violence, breach of contract, and non-honoring financial obligations. So in all countries, you will have a political risk insurance, so you can buy this insurance, but after that you have to prove who is guilty for this, and you also have to negotiate concerning the amount you will get from that. So this was for the protection. Now, after that you have three other possibilities. The first one is political capital and political influence. So this is a euphemism for lobbying on one side, CSR on the other side. So you are building the political capital that you have within the country, especially if you're a big company. In that case, we have usually a higher political capital. The second one is political protection from the state when you are looking at the nationality of the corporation. So this is where we have problems. Do corporations have a nationality? Where do they pay taxes? What are the laws that they have to obey, and so on. And the last one is this one, the extreme situation, involvement in elections, corruption, and bribery. So of course in business school we don't talk very much about corruption or bribery, because you may have some other ways how to learn about it or how to practice it. However, we have to be aware that this exists, and many corporations believe that it is a shortcut. Why should I investigate about this country when I can go to see the president of this country, I give him some money, and everything is okay? However, this can be a little bit dangerous. I will just take one example, which is a very recent example. As you know, the former Prime Minister Najib has spent some hours not custody, let's say in hearings in Malaysia yesterday. And now the question is, they are investigating one very big scandal, which is called 1MDB. So I suppose that you are aware about this very big scandal. So let's try to imagine the situation 2 years ago when he was the strong man of Malaysia, and you want to have some business with Malaysia, and you believe, for whatever the reason is, corruption and bribery could be a good way for you to do this. So after that, we have to see who has been involved in that. And we are talking about billions of dollars. And there is one newspaper, and this newspaper is the Wall Street Journal. And the Wall Street Journal, from the very beginning, was extremely critical about one MDB and the involvement of the Prime Minister in this. And for 2 years practically, the Wall Street Journal has been putting pressure on the Ministry of Justice in the United States to open an investigation in the United States for the operations coming from one MDB. And this is what happened. So the pressure was not only coming domestically from Malaysia, but also from outside, from the United States. So in that case, if your company is here, let's say this one, the BSI Bank in Singapore, which has been shut down because of the scandal concerning one MDB, it means that you run a corporation, you have a company, you are very close to the political establishment, but this could backfire on you. And protection against this is practically zero, because this is a kind of catastrophe for the company that you cannot plan for, and you have to suffer the consequences. I will finish with the some options which exist today, which are quite interesting because they differ from everything that we have seen before. The first one is diplomatic representations. If we consider that a state and a corporation are on the same level, in that case they should have ambassadors. It means that they should exchange ambassadors. And this is what is happening in the Silicon Valley, where one country, and this country is Denmark, has sent the first ambassador to the Silicon Valley. They didn't send an ambassador to Washington, they already have one. But they are sending an ambassador to the Silicon Valley in order to have diplomatic relationship with the giants from the Silicon Valley. And it is the first time that one country is sending an ambassador to one corporation or to one group of companies. But could the country means, in that case Denmark. Denmark is very small, remember? It is not in the first 50 of the different countries. So they're very small, and the giants from the Silicon Valley are much bigger than Denmark itself. So they're sending a diplomatic representative there, and maybe in the future we will have more and more countries sending diplomatic representatives to the different corporations or group of corporations. This is how he looks like. So it was it just happened 2 years back. It's a completely new thing. So we have to see what the other countries are going to do. The second option is this one. This is the CEO of Rio Tinto. And Rio Tinto is one of the biggest companies in the mining industry worldwide, present everywhere for all type of natural resources, especially mining, that is minerals. What did he say? He is calling for the United Nations of the mining world. So it means that the corporations will establish the equivalent of the United Nations. And if they establish the equivalent of the United Nations, they will not negotiate with specific countries. They will negotiate with the United Nations. And they will say, we are strong enough, look at the list. So we are strong enough, we are much stronger than your 100 different countries which are in the United Nations. So we respect that states have one club, which is called the United Nations. Let us also have one club at the same time. So I would like to finish with these options because they are showing how innovation can also happen there. So for the conclusion, and if we are going back to the title, there is no ideological war anymore. So there is not equivalent of the Iron Curtain or the Cold War that we used to have until 1991. Today, the only opposition which may exist is between states and corporations. And what is happening is that states are asking from corporations to be involved more and more in the social life of the countries. This is why the topic of CSR is a very important one, because they're telling you, you also have a social responsibility towards the communities, your environment, and so on. But if I am the corporation, I would say, okay, if you ask me to be engaged in the social life, give me some political power in exchange. So I think that in the future, there would be a negotiation. If you are asking the corporations to be involved in the social life, they will also ask for political power within the country. So we cannot predict what may happen, but there's two examples here. That is sending representatives to corporations and corporations asking for the United Nations of corporations. They are interesting and intriguing examples. I will finish on this and I will open the discussion. If you have some questions, I will be happy to answer. If you have some comments, it will be also very happy to listen to you. Thank you for listening.
Question here.
Yes. Please.
Good evening, my name is Yvonne. Thank you for your presentation. I'm also a graduate of Sciences Po.
That's good.
I'd like to ask you, so this separation between states and corporations seems to me a bit artificial, given that, for example, you can see many states operating through corporations, like the state-owned companies in China. So do you see that this kind of invisible forces operating, and do you see this kind of state-corporation divide becoming more and more artificial in future? Thank you.
You're right to mention this case, especially of the state-owned enterprises in China. And maybe you remember the latest agreement that they had for the company called ZTE in the United States in order to continue to operate in the United States. And it was clearly a negotiation between the two governments. It was not a negotiation between ZTE and the United States or something else. So you're absolutely right to mention the case where we have state-owned or private companies, but we don't know what is the distance between private and public in some countries. So in that case, of course, they are private, but they are, let's say, under heavy supervision and under heavy control of the government itself. And there are countries like this. So I will put these countries a little bit aside. I am using here companies coming from the Western world. So in that case, I use mainly two countries, France on one side and the United States. And you are absolutely right to mention it doesn't cover all the countries in the world where you have public or, let's say, semi-public companies. I am going very often to the Middle East, and especially to Bahrain. And in Bahrain, my students are coming from Saudi Arabia, from Kuwait, and from Bahrain. And my students from Saudi Arabia, they come from a corporation called Aramco. And Saudi Aramco is the biggest company in the world. Of course, it is not on the stock exchange, but they are planning an IPO. Remember? IPO for 5% of it, $2 trillion. So it is a very huge IPO that they are going to launch. And this company, Aramco, is practically operating like a state in a state. They have their own compounds, they have their own laws, etc. So of course it is a public company, but I asked them, what does it mean public? Who is owning you? And they say, I don't know. Is it the royal family? Is it the state? Is it the diwan? Or is it something else? It's very hard. So there are countries in the world where it is extremely hard to assess who is owning what. But in the Western countries, it is a little bit more, let's say, easier to identify.
Yes. My name is Steven. Thank you for sharing. Very interesting. Just now I saw the bank's notes. Three pieces of them mention worldwide bank. Is that correct?
For the banknotes.
Yeah. And maybe can you share with us
The real ones or the false ones?
the false one?
The false ones. Okay.
Worldwide bank. Yeah. Do you have any reason why you choose this name?
Okay.
Just one curious.
It's not me, yeah. In fact, there is a French designer, and the name of the French designer is given here, J. Delou. And this designer, who is designing among other things, he came up with this idea in order to have the banknotes with the faces of famous CEOs, founders of different companies, and showing how important these corporations are. So, unfortunately, I'm not talented enough in order to draw these banknotes, so I borrowed from J. Deleuze. So he designed them.
Hi, my name is Rainey, and let's say there's a nation,
Yes.
right, on your left-hand side, top 10.
Ah, okay.
No,
So I think it's after.
it's okay.
No, it's
I
before.
won't identify the nation. Let's say
Okay.
it's quite highly ranked.
Okay.
Nation X.
Okay.
They have
Sorry.
a tendency to expropriate
Yes.
from infrastructure developments, okay? So, infrastructure round one, they
Hmm?
expropriate.
That's right.
Project, it goes ahead into an international arbitration lawsuit.
That's right.
Nation X does it again
Of course.
in the next curve for
Yeah.
Industry 2.0.
Yeah.
And then 3.0, they do the same thing.
Yeah.
So my question is, when they're going to comment Nation X 4.0, should you not lobby every single foreign investor
Yeah.
to prohibit and block them from going into the same state,
Mhm.
which will always expropriate?
So, the question about expropriations is, of course, not covered by the WTO, because this is the absolute no-no concerning the international trade, free trade, respect of investment, foreign direct investments in all countries where, even if you are coming here to Singapore with an FDI, they will ask what is the protection against this. And the Republic of Singapore will say, we respect all the investments that you are making here, and there won't be any expropriation. You have a very few cases of modern expropriation, so this is why I use the case of Venezuela. But it may happen in other countries if some radicals are also taking power. So they can also imagine to expropriate. You can be sure that there won't be FDIs coming from abroad. But maybe they don't care about it because they're pursuing a political agenda. They're not looking at the economic one. So the political agenda is to say, we have been elected or we have seized power in order to expel foreigners who are taking all the benefits from our country. This is usually the speech that they are giving to you. But what is happening in Venezuela is that they don't have enough to eat. It used to be the richest country in Latin America, and they have the biggest reserves of oil, maybe not only in Latin America. And we have the situation when they have to go to neighboring countries in order to beg for food, because within the country they don't have food. But the president doesn't care. He's pursuing a political agenda. So for him, the economic worries are secondary. He is only focusing on the political ones.
But you see, Venezuela is ranked quite lowly in this GDP list.
Yeah,
However, Nation X is quite highly ranked.
That's
You
right.
know, so
Okay, so you can
That's
have
a
the
fact,
United
but
States.
yeah.
You can, for instance, let's say that the company is Exxon, that is the American one. So Exxon has been expropriated, and they are asking for the protection of the United States. Will the United States send troops there in order to eliminate Maduro? Well, it used to be the case in the past. So maybe they can do it also in the future. So in the past, sometimes you don't hesitate to protect your own companies. And we used to have problems with Del Monte, maybe you remember this company, this fruit company, when the United States have sent troops in order to protect the country. Okay? But today, I sincerely cannot imagine that one nation state will send troops in order to protect a company coming from this country. Today, it's very difficult, but in the past it was the case, and it was very easy to do it.
Hi, my name is Philippe. I'm I'm an alumni of the Executive MBA. So you mentioned about this interaction between companies and nations. There is an official platform called Davos.
Yes.
So what is your opinion? How important is Davos today? How influential is Davos in that range?
So I would say that Davos is having two phases. One phase is the place where we are discussing situations for the future. And it is a very good place when we discuss it. And in that case, they are inviting, let's say, specialists. So they are not necessarily heads of state, and they are not necessarily heads of corporations. But you have people who are visionary, and they invite them in order to talk about the future. It could be robotics, it can be artificial intelligence, it can be social relationship, whatever. So that's the very good part of it. And the other one is the political part. So the political part means that you have to show up. So it's only for the show off. You are going there in order to show how important you are. So either you are invited, either you are paying in order to go there. So I'm not really in favor of the second one. But the first one, where you have the, let's say, the assembly of political decision makers with corporate and visionaries, and when they really discuss about the future, that's the good part of it. The other one is a little bit political show-off, but it can happen for many other meetings. Yes?
Yeah, hi, I'm Eric. As I was listening to your presentation, I was thinking that maybe the weight of these multinational corporations is a fantastic opportunity for the citizens to have some power over the government. After all, maybe you can trust Wikipedia more than you could trust your government for information, for example. And also, every time you buy a product as a consumer, you can withdraw your trust instantly. And this corporation, if they are not doing what you want, they can go down. So maybe this is the ultimate form of democracy.
That's right. So now, there are two things for that. This is representing the globalization in the 20th century and the globalization in the 21st century. And the globalization of the 21st century is based on internet and especially social media. With social media today, there is a possibility for you to bypass the state and even to bypass the corporation and to establish, let's say, interstate or international cooperation with the people who maybe think like you. So whatever the opinion it is. And this is very powerful. And you can establish your own groups and putting pressure on governments. So this is how, for instance, the Arab Spring has started. And we had the result of it. So the Arab Spring was not only coming from internet and digitalization, but there was a huge presence concerning the social media for the Arab Spring. Today, all the countries, I think, they learned the lessons from the Arab Spring, and they don't want this to happen in whatever the country it is. So they would like to control now the internet, and they are putting so much controls on the internet that sometimes we are not even aware about this kind of control. So I cannot imagine that in the near future we will have something which will look like the Arab Spring. However, putting pressure on states can happen, putting pressure on corporations can happen, and especially for something which is a reputational damage for the corporation. So this reputational damage can spiral, and it can become very viral for them. So I agree with you, on one side, the consumers or the citizens will have very much power using social media and the internet, but don't underestimate the state and the power of the state in order to control this. For the corporations, it can also be the case with Cambridge Analytica, maybe you remember, concerning the elections in the United States. It can also be the case for the companies which hold data. Not all of them hold data, but for the companies which hold data, maybe they have a power which is much, much higher than the states. So probably in the future, there would be some kind of, let's say, negotiation or even confrontation between companies which hold data and the states on the other side.
Hi, my name is Jessica. You give very interesting examples about the relationship between corporations and countries, but it goes both ways. For example, like Apple, who put the task nations, and nations who put the task to the corporations, and examples at the back where you mentioned about how companies asking for United Nations and state companies wanting to have a better relationship with powerful corporations in the Silicon Valley. But however, your hypothesis was about whether there's a increasing Cold War between nations and corporations. I was just wondering whether could it be that there's instead of a Cold War, it shows that there's a increasing independency between corporations and nations as we move forward in the.
So this is the central question that we have here. What would be the evolution between them? So we can have, let's say, a positive outcome, or we can have a negative one. The positive outcome is the cooperation. So in that case, the companies, the corporations will cooperate with the states. But the problem now, with which state will they cooperate? If it is a global company. For instance, if we have Apple, or if we have Exxon, whatever, if they are looking at the revenues which are coming from the United States and the revenues coming from China, if they have more revenues coming from China than revenues coming from the United States, which country is important for them? Is it the US or is it China? And will they be closer to China or will they be closer to the US? So this is for the global companies which are present worldwide. If you take the companies such as Nestle, originating from Switzerland, less than 2% of their revenue is coming from Switzerland. So why should they be identified with Switzerland? They could say, okay, we are paying taxes there. But if, for instance, another country such as the US represents 10% of our revenues, while Switzerland represents less than 2%, why should I be closer to Switzerland? I should be closer to my main market, and my main market is in the United States. So for many global companies, there would be a question. Of course, they want to cooperate with the state, but if there is an animosity between two states, which one will they go with? So let's say that there is a cooperation. Usually, corporations will pursue private interest. States will pursue public interest. So there is an antinomy between them. So there is no equality between them. They can cooperate, but they cannot be equivalent in this. But if the state is asking the corporations to help in the public interest, in that case, the states will ask also political power. So even if there is a cooperation, I think that in the future, the corporations will start to ask for more political power within the country. And the second option is confrontation. So confrontation is very damageable for the company, and you have seen that Mark Zuckerberg has been forced to go to the Senate in the United States in order for the hearing, when they were grilling him, of course in the House of Representatives, but also in the Senate, in order to explain all this scandal about Cambridge Analytica. But even this confrontation is not a real confrontation. It is not an army confrontation, it is not an economic confrontation. So I presume that the title, which was Widening Cold War, is a little bit exaggerated. That it was just a teaser in order to talk about that, but probably we'll have some kind of cooperation. Hey, I would like to thank you very much for all the questions. We can continue with that. I would like to leave Darren for a few words about the program, and after that we'll have some time in order to continue to talk, but also to have something to eat and drink. Do we have something to eat and drink?
Absolutely.
Good. Otherwise, we don't invite people.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so here comes the sales pitch. No. Thank you once again for coming down, and I hope you enjoyed that. I found it exceptionally interesting. I would like to talk a little bit more about the ESSEC Mannheim Executive MBA, Asia Pacific. We have our 5th intake this year. So the program has been around in Europe for a very long time, in ESSEC Business School in France, and in Mannheim Business School in Germany, arguably two of the top European business schools. And we have a vast cohort and a vast alumni in Europe, and also a growing alumni across Asia, some of whom are here this evening. Cedomir, you took the clicker. Oh, you didn't. Here it is. Excuse me. I hope it's kinder to me than it was to Cedomir. Okay, so this is our campus, located in One North, in just between Buena Vista stations and One North MRT station. It is a purpose-built campus for ESSEC Asia Pacific, and ESSEC was invited by the EDB, the Economic Development Board of Singapore, to come in and set up our school. So we've been here for quite some time. We do have other campuses elsewhere. Our main campus in Europe is in Cergy, which is just outside Paris. In central Paris, we have our La Défense campus, and ESSEC Asia Pacific, of course, and our most recently owned campus in Africa is in Morocco, in Rabat. So, Singapore is, of course, a very attractive location for ESSEC to be. It's a regional hub. We're surrounded by an ecosystem of many businesses at One North. It's the education, research, and startup innovation cluster in Singapore. We have and we act as a dual gateway for our participants to Asia and Europe, and also our corporate partners, business to business. And we find that the mix of cultures and the integration on our campus is very pleasant and really contributes to a great learning environment. So the three principles, or the basis on which our campus is founded, or the strategy in Asia Pacific, is on innovation, internationalization, and involvement. So Singapore was our first campus outside of France, and we really have a very strong commitment not only to Singapore but to the wider Asia Pacific region. So this is where we're located. Are you all familiar with the One North area? Okay. So you can see we're surrounded by the various clusters that the EDB and the Singaporean government have set up. And this really provides us the lifeblood of interaction on our campus with businesses and with many other participants. So we're a fully fledged campus. We deliver programs right through from undergraduate right through to PhD. This evening we're speaking about the EMBA, or the Executive MBA, but we offer, and our faculty teach on all of these programs. So they're not flying faculty in that sense. They are all based in Singapore. Of course, we do have professors from France and elsewhere in the world who come to the campus and teach quite often. So let's drill down into the ESSEC Mannheim EMBA. You've already met Cedomir, and Cedomir developed the Asia Pacific version of the ESSEC Mannheim EMBA. As I said, we're having our 5th intake this year, and yeah, it's a growing program. Here are some of our multinational faculty and experts based in Singapore. So our current dean is Professor Kevin Young. He's from Singapore, and Cedomir is the program director. Our incoming dean is Professor Arti Ramaswamy, and she will take up her role in September. So you can see it's a very broad and diverse collection of faculty with many diverse areas of specialization. Okay, so the curriculum overview. It's a very innovative program. We cover a broad range of subject areas, and it's quite unique in the sense that it's not solely about leadership or strategy. We do look at very interesting areas such as geopolitics as well as Islamic business. It's a very forward-looking curriculum, really preparing people for what's coming down the line in the world of work and how the Industrial Revolution 4.0 is really changing the world of work. So, our students. We have a small class size, so we're highly selective. We only have a maximum intake of 20 participants every year. And that allows for a really personal engagement between the students, amongst themselves, and also with the faculty and the content. So, as we said, 15 to 20 participants per cohort, an average age of around 37, considerable corporate or organizational experience, about plenty of managerial experience too, and a very diverse range of nationalities. Here are some of our alumni, and we do have some of them physically present in the room this evening, so I'm sure you're looking forward to hearing from them. Okay, I'll allow Mark to speak for himself, as I know he's here. Okay, so once again, key details on the program. It's a 15-month program. It's very intensive in the sense that we take the participants for 6 full days, 10 times on campus, and 2 overseas residencies. There is the option of other residencies, and in the past we have gone to Georgetown in the US and also to Brazil. So the admission requirements are as follows. We're really looking at the whole person though. It's not just a quantitative overview or a quantitative appraisal of the person. It's really looking at what they can bring to the program from their personal experience and their work experience. And again, general management program, an Asia-Pacific core, very innovative curriculum, and a compact class size yet again. So the application process is as follows. You can have an initial discussion with Cedomir this evening, but we would recommend that you come to the campus and meet him there and discuss the program in more detail. We have an online application, and then we shortlist candidates, invite them to a jury. It's a very quick turnaround on that decision, and an offer is made, and enrollment proceeds. We also offer scholarships, and the program fees are very competitive, I think, for this region and for the nature of the program. And we'll be happy to discuss this later. You can contact me. I look forward to speaking with you this evening after we hear from our alumni. So if I could possibly invite Mark and Mirko to the stage. I understand you're an alumnus as well, so it'd be fantastic to hear from you too, sir. Yes? Okay. Please, yeah. Thank you. Okay. I need to find another mic. Okay. So this is Mr. Please, yeah. Mirko, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi everybody, I'm Mirko Petrelli, I'm Italian, and I attended ESSEC in 2015 until February 2017. I used to work in Hong Kong, and then I moved to Singapore, also thanks to the MBA, because I came here to open the office for the company that I work for. So I work in executive search and executive coaching. And well, I'm here to answer your questions that you might have regarding the program. For myself, I just want to say that it was one of the best experiences of my life, and not only for the content, but also for the people that I met and the residencies. And in our case, we went to Los Angeles and also Seoul, and also, I mean, the faculty, the professors. So for me, it was really a great experience. And yeah, I pass the mic now. You have already saw.
Thank you so much. My name is Philippe Wint. I'm French. I'm graduated from the ESSEC MBA in 2002. I started in 2000, and it's quite a long time ago. I'm an engineer initially. I've been working I think 10 years before I did my MBA. I've been in Singapore for 10 years now. I changed jobs, I had different jobs. When I did my MBA, I was working for Suez or Engie, I think a large French multinational. After the MBA, they sent me overseas. I did a few CEO jobs for them, and after a while I left and I moved to Singapore. I've been working for McKinsey for a few years, and then now I work for a private equity fund where my main job is to acquire a company in the energy sector worldwide. I should say that of course the MBA was very convenient for me, because when I started, my wife delivered one baby, and then when I finished there was a second baby, and I've been able to support her during that time as well, and I didn't stop my work. I didn't see the impact of my MBA immediately, but it's only probably many years later that I saw what the MBA brought to me, and I should say that if I didn't do this MBA, I wouldn't be in the position that I am now. Even if my job, my degree was a good engineering degree. When I came to Singapore, even if I had a good engineering degree, my MBA was the one that was recognized, even with the authorities here. I also been interacting with ESSEC. I teach now project finance at ESSEC, at the Master of Finance, for the past 6 years. Of course, the students are more junior, but it's also a very interesting experience to teach finance. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Mark, originally from Shanghai, China, now a Singapore citizen. At my early stage of my career, I was doing sales. Then about more than 10 years ago, I joined HR field as an HR professional. So I'm a chemical engineer by training, and now doing HR management. I'm working for Alangsu. I think my profile is not updated yet. I just changed my job during my course. I was now working for Alangsu, the biggest rubber maker in the world, to lead their Singapore HR function. I think the program itself really gave me a lot of, not only about knowledge, but about of the confidence, the networking, and I can learn really from my peers, because I think for the design of the program that we are really selective in choosing the participants, so I really can see a good batch of students. We work closely, and I can learn from them. They are from I think in my batch we have people from 6 countries. I'm from the 3rd batch, freshly graduated this year. So welcome to your questions if you want to know more about the programs. I can guarantee you it is a good program. Actually, I want to do MBA a long time ago, but at the time I was young, so I had to save money. Until I save enough money, I become old. So can't take EMBA. So that's why I welcome you to join the program early to help you to develop your career. Thank you very much.
So do we have any questions for our alumni? Thank you.
I don't need a microphone.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi guys, thank you so much. It was very inspiring. I was wondering in the curriculum, which were the most applicable pieces for you for your professional life that you would apply immediately?
Okay, go ahead.
I can start. For me, it was the digital part, because it was something that clearly I couldn't study at the university many years ago, where we just barely had the internet. And doing, for example, executive search, sometimes I have clients who ask me, I don't know, we need to hire an e-commerce manager or a head of digital, and it was a little bit difficult to understand what they were talking about in a sense. So in the course there are a few modules that are about e-commerce, digital marketing, and for me it was very helpful in that sense and immediately applicable at work.
Yeah, I think I will say three key elements I learned from the MBA. The first one is that I was together with a group of people like more or less same class of age, same energy and smart guys or ladies, and we were working on the group to do some cases, and this is something new because I'm an engineer. I've never done that before, so it was a very good practice. It was international. It was in English. I mean, it was something different. So it was a very strong, and it was for a long time because it was for 15 months. So I mean, you do it again, and you start to create some bonding, and you learn from yourself. So that's the first is interaction with these kind of people that are not within your company. They are from outside. So I mean, you really learn something different, and there's no taboo. The second key point, which is very important, was the case spirit. I mean, this is typical from MBA, but you know, I don't know today, but in engineering school as well, you don't learn on cases, you don't have this practice. So it was something very good exercise that after I've been able to learn a lot, and I use it a lot in my job and even now. And the third thing is, of course, is everything that goes around high level finance, because as well, I was an engineer, never learned finance at all.
Yeah, I think the same thing for me. If you ask me personally, the most beneficial course is finance. To learn accounting, to learn corporate finance. But from my career perspective, I'm doing HR, so I'm more interested in the HR course. So before I do the HR course, I think HR should be easier. I'm doing HR for 10 years. I know what the HR about. So recruitment, trainings, common band, whatever. Then actually after 3 days course, we all talk about one topic, which is people management. So to me, it's very important to realize that in the end, what is HR doing for the business is to help them to manage their people. So if you order to be a good HR leader, you should look at the HR function from this point of view. If you can equip or coach or support your business leaders to have a good people management, that will be a very big value to bring to the organization. So if you ask me, that's why I say it's a good course. It's really a good course. Before you attend the course, of course you have certain expectations, but after you really take the course, you realize, oh, actually how much you can benefit from the course itself. So this is my personal view.
Any other questions?
Can I have another one?
No limitation.
Since no one is asking questions, then I will take the initiative. What makes this program, I guess you did your due diligence when you selected the program in terms of MBAs. There are so many out in the market, I think we all know. What makes this program more unique than what's out there in the market?
In terms of the, let's say, the program before in the selection process, for me, I did interview candidates for the job that I'm doing because I've been doing HR for 10 years and now executive search for 7. So I find the SEC one of the best for preparing candidates who are not going to work, let's say, in the traditional consulting world. Many MBAs prepare people specifically for that. ESSEC give you also a preparation that you can use in a normal corporation. After that, I mean, after I finish, I would say probably what makes it unique, also comparing notes with other people who went to other university, is the smaller size of the class, so you get to know the people more in depth, and also the professors. And that, in my opinion, makes a difference, because I saw the difference when we went into the residency, and all in a sudden we were like 40, 45. You want to ask a question, there are other 40 people who want to ask a question, so your time is very limited, while when you are 15, 20, you can ask more.
So in my case, I didn't do the MBA in Singapore, but I did in Paris, so it was a bit different, but I think the principles are more or less the same, actually. When I did the due diligence at that time, actually, there was very few MBA, and I think ESSEC was one of the very first one. Even INSEAD or HEC, for example, didn't have an MBA at the time. And I found it revolutionary. I think I found it was a very good concept, and I like it extremely. And the fact that it was in La Défense was also very good because it's a very close campus. It's very urbanite, so it's not, you don't have to go far away, you know. And it's very convenient when you work, when you are already an active person. You just go, you commute. I mean, it's very close, very convenient. It's very integrated, So it's not the same spirit than going far away in a remote campus like a top university. So I found it was very applicable. The other things that I liked about ESSEC when I did my due diligence was it is ESSEC. ESSEC is not only an MBA machine, is also having professors and teaching students from different backgrounds. So I found it a sign of flexibility and reliability, and as well a strong backup. So not being only focused on putting you in your head the typical kind of MBA element. So ESSEC, so as a Frenchman, ESSEC for me was the business school that has the strongest DNA for entrepreneurship, even more than HEC or inside. I mean, that's what I was thinking at the time. I still think about this. It's really a school that creates entrepreneur with a strong entrepreneur spirit.
Actually, this is an interview question when I applied for the program. So now I'm trying to recall what I have said at the time. So to show Professor I'm an honest person, I didn't lie to him at that time. Okay, basically, I think a few things. First of all, the school reputation. I think my friend also said that just now. Second thing is about the content of the course. I look at all the courses, modules, what are the content. And the third thing is about the class of the size of the class, which is about 15 people, so we can have a more intimate, close interactions. The last thing is about the schedule, the time we have, because it was from Monday to Saturday. So I just need to take 1 week off from my usual work. I don't need to quit my job. I don't need to work. Study too much over the weekend. I lost my weekend. So I think the schedule is a good thing. Of course, the last thing is about the price. I think it's a very good price, value in money. Thank you.
Okay then. Well, thank you very much for your attention. I'd like to thank our alumni and thank you all for coming this evening. We'd like to invite you to join a networking session now. Please feel free to ask any further questions you may have about the program. And yeah, I hope you can enjoy the wine and food provided by Straits Clan this evening. So thank you all.